Greetings, everybody. This is Christopher Messina coming at you from the Messy Time studios of the glorious Space Coast of Florida, unaffected by the SBF FTX impact because we're not stupid suckers. Joined today in his airy in Northern Illinois is Bruce Domenici, intelligent lawyer who is experienced in cyber insurance and cybersecurity issues. Bruce, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Amen. What's on your mind today? There's an intellectual hole burning its way in your consciousness, and I would love to release the pressure and share it with our audience.
So we're going to talk about cyber insurance today, but in a whole different dynamic. And hopefully I will spark some animated curiosity, perhaps outrage with your listeners, and perhaps I will spark a bit of animation from you as my first audience.
Impossible. I am a calm, placid lake. I'm imperturbable, and there's nothing about the mistakes of our government that will ever get under my skin. But go for it. Give it a shot.
So we'll start here. The Government Accountability Office, GAO,
which in itself is one of the funniest names ever created by someone who lacks irony in the federal government. But go on.
The GAO. Accountability, put together in one sentence. I should let you swallow your water before I go further.
No, you go on. I've heard of the Government Accountability Office before. It's hilarious, but go on. Perhaps my audience have not.
So they asked our CISA, which is Homeland Security, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, and the Federal Insurance Office, which is part of our Department of Treasury, and take a moment. Because the Department of Treasury manages our money in the government, you know they do a good job.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
So
it's a given. You know, I was going to say, and it's not just because tax season's coming up, but every time I've encountered anyone from the IRS specifically, it's like I stepped into a Ford model shoot. It's kind of incredible. They are glorious in demeanor, pleasing of mien, dressed to the nines. They almost seem like they're created of better stuff than we are, than normal people. But anyway, go on.
So the GAO asked those two venerable institutions, the insurance and CISA, to please take a hard look at the topic of federal backstop for cyber insurance.
Oh, that sounds good. So whenever someone says backstop, that means taxpayers are going to be on the hook for incredibly stupid things done by morons in the private sector.
Well, I was going to use a different definition, but I think we'll use yours.
Fair enough. And the beautiful thing is you can always blame it on me. You don't take credit for that description.
Wouldn't blame anything for you. First of all, I'm accountable because I'm in interaction with you. So therefore
you chose this path. It's true. Go on. Sorry, I won't interrupt. As hard as it is when I hear things like government accountability, but go on.
So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take just a minute and go through some just to define cyber insurance for a moment, because we're going to use the term. So sure. I took this from a U.S. Treasury report, and of course, that means that it's authentic. So they define it as risks arising from the use of electronic data and its transmission, including technology tools such as the internet and telecommunications networks. Now, just to tee this up, because this is largely about the insurance industry. Again, relying on this Treasury report, cyber insurance loss ratios were only 48% in 2015. In 2020, they went to 72%.
And loss ratios for the uninitiated are what? What does that mean?
Well, that's basically the relationship on the part of the insurance carrier to their investment, if you will, in receiving the premiums and their payout from claims from different insureds.
Right. So a payout of 101% would mean they've lost $1 every time they pay out 100 or 101, because they took in premium for 100 and they paid out 101. Here they took in premium for 100 and they paid out 72.
Yes, and in 2020 went it to 72%. Perhaps some of them had to put in a capital call for their pension fund investors,
who were no doubt pleased by this turn of events.
Yes. So the insurance company, go figure, they thought maybe this was an issue.
Yeah.
So,
and let's look around for a new pool of suckers. I mean pigeons. I mean helpful investors. And no one is dumb enough to backstop this except for the federal government.
So what happens when this occurs is you look to shuck some of your liability. So because the federal government has public dollars in an infinite source of revenue, why not?
Yes, and as we know from modern monetary theory, you can just print money all day long with no impacts. Just ask the cute bartender from Queens. Go on.
Just make sure that you have all of the metal strips and the different ink in the currency so it doesn't get counterfeited, because that could cause dilution in value of the currency.
Yeah, right. You know what I would do any day of the week? I would take all the dilution caused by counterfeiters from 1810 to now over what the Fed does in an afternoon. But go on, I digress.
But here's the real question. Would you add the dilution of the Confederate dollars into that equation? Would you encompass that loss as well?
Here in Florida, we still count that as legal tender at face value.
I'm sorry, I may have delved into a touchy subject. Let's get back on track.
Let's go away from, who's going to win this time. Go ahead.
On that point, keep in mind that we think we won the Revolutionary War with England, but when you look at the American dollars going to England from the Premier Soccer, you understand the meaning of the sublime phrase, there's more than one way to win a war.
Exactly. Oh, no, we're not in charge, you idiots, anymore. I mean, we lost. How sad. But if you piss me off, I'm going to float up the Potomac and burn down your Capitol building again.
Exactly. So there we go. So that's sort of the backdrop. And another corollary that comes into play that we have to mention is the war and nation states exclusion.
Yes, so this is awesome. This is great. So do share that with people who think they bought cyber insurance as a small business or anybody.
So we'll start with what are the occasions when you might see in your cyber insurance policy an exclusion for acts of war or nation states? And the answer is only if Lloyd's of London reinsured your carrier, or if your carrier chose to implement that language itself. So it's only those policies where you have to worry about this particular term.
Right.
And the way that war and nation states tends to be defined, and there's no standardization, that's a harbinger, that's a bellwether, Chris. We'll go back to that point, is that carriers will seek
with the dictionary, no doubt we'll go back to those topics.
Yes. Carriers will seek to exclude losses, whether it's kinetic war, which is what we all think of as a conventional war, or an undeclared war, for which there are numerous examples in the history, Western and Eastern civilization. And just to make it fun, the terminology for these war and nation state exclusions is not standard across different carriers, such that it depended on your carrier, that could be the definition. And oh, by the way, because you are a curious sort, no, these definitions do not always line up with the definition of war in the United States Code. And why would they? Why would you seek to have some kind of predictability or reliability in something that's this potent? But
right. Well, and for those listeners who would pay attention to the funsies and why words matter, is right after Hurricane Sandy in New York, Governor Cuomo at the time led the war to demand that the NOAA, that the National Oceanographic people who are in charge of defining the degrees of Hurricane 3, 4, 5, Category 5 versus superstorm, whatever. He fought and yelled and screamed. And in fact, this was never a hurricane, despite the flooding of Lower Manhattan, the destruction in New Jersey. We sat facing out over the river and watched. It was like the Terminator. These massive balls of flame would go up, and then half of Jersey go dark. But in the aftermath, he fought hard to get that hurricane declared a tropical storm, because the word hurricane triggered massive payouts from insurers and reinsurers, whereas a mere tropical storm did not. So the insurance industry, people will be surprised to find out, they love taking in premium, and gosh, they don't like paying out claims.
They don't. And so if your policy has this war or nation state, then if you suffer a loss that is directly or indirectly related to an event that our friends in Washington characterize as an act of war or an act by a nation state,
right,
you don't have coverage.
Right. So if you got hacked by the Russians because your VP of operations had tweeted that "Go Ukraine," then you're screwed. Whereas if you've been hacked by the Lithuanians who just want to hack you, you can get coverage in the exact same event.
That's yes. Although the risk is broader, because if you're making use of a system that hackers attack, they might have attacked the system with the idea of shutting down the Ukrainian oil fields. But oops, who knew?
They turned off your entire power to your production line and everything stopped for a month, right?
Over here in Nebraska, well,
Right.
that could still be considered an exclusion from the policy. So that's an interesting dynamic. So,
and who usually gets to adjudicate whether this was an act of war or not?
Oh, well, thank you for allowing me to advertise for my esteemed profession of the practice.
Please, this way, go for it.
So here's what happens. Basically, this is a little simplified, but under the applicable law, the burden is on the insurance carrier to establish that it is an act of war or nation state. However, if our friends in Washington determine that it is an act of war or nation state, that satisfies the burden of the insurance carrier. So the insured, and think of a small or medium business for which revenue does not flow as readily as from the government printing office. They now have to call their counsel to say, I want to litigate this. And counsel says, very well, we shall do so. Right. And I see that your losses are, let's pick a fun figure, $5 million. I see that your losses are $5 million. Especially if this occurs now, insurance carriers will fight doggedly to avoid some kind of precedent in court that hurts them later.
Right. So it's not just you they're worried about, it's all the knock-on effects of everyone after you.
That is correct. And so therefore, I'm going to tell you that let's budget $2.5 to $3 million for my legal fees, because I need to put a good crew on this.
Right.
But the fun doesn't stop there. We also have to hire Messina cybersecurity forensic firm, because
we're good, but boy, are we pricey.
Very pricey. And I have begged Chris to reduce his rates, but Chris refused to do so.
You pay for what you get in this world. You want quality, you pay for quality. It's the Messy Times motto.
So we're going to pursue that $5 million. You want a budget? Let's make it fun. $3.75 million in their pursuit, and I can't guarantee we'll win. So when do we get started?
Right. Go for it. Exactly. Fight my battle. Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. So basically, if you have a policy, you might as well consider that a foregone deductible and move on with your life, because your policy covers nothing.
Well, possibly what you would do, the sort of the proper vanguard on this is to say, beef up your cybersecurity to try to resist succumbing to the attack that the Russians or Iran, or pick the people of your choice, launched on a system through capillary action came to attack you. If you have proper cyber safeguards in place, perhaps you could escape harm, which is, you're about to say this, probably a whole lot cheaper than paying the lawyer and the Messina cybersecurity forensic firm.
No matter how good we are. Oh, it's true. Now, you always want, an ounce of prevention is worth at least 40 years of my life. So
yes.
So that's kind of not new news for a lot of people. The insurance companies will try to dodge paying out. And that is of particular interest to any corporate treasurer or executive team or board that is deciding whether or kind of how much and what type of cyber insurance they need to purchase, usually because their commercial contracts require that they have it. So it's become this thing you got to have. You try to get something, but leaving aside all of that, which is a nuanced discussion for each board to have. The bigger issue here is, because this is turning into more and more of a mess, and there are two types of companies in the world, those who've been hacked and those who don't know they've been hacked. The request here from the insurance industry is, and potentially also from private industry, is that the federalities stand there to write blank checks to anyone who gets impacted by someone that they can claim it was an act of war. Is that a summary?
Yes.
That's accurate?
And that is an excellent entree into the heart of the topic. Because to go back to the Government Accountability Office, they asked the federal insurance and CISA, please ask for comments from the public on whether we should have a federal backstop insurance. So,
Do they post this on a very hidden part of a website that's not publicly searchable that you had to dive through and know 4 languages to get to? I didn't catch this.
you don't read the Federal Register every Thursday?
It's so exciting. Well, you know, and you know what's great about it, and this is a little bit of a plug for the Federal Register, is I used to have to take a lot of sleeping pills to get to sleep at night. No more, no more. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, I sleep like a baby. I get about 3 pages in and I'm out.
Well, what you may have read or may have missed is, of course, they asked for comments on this idea of federal backstop insurance. And this is where I think it starts getting interesting, and hopefully I'll animate some curiosity on your part. So there's a Risk and Insurance Management Society. And to be clear, prior to reading their comment, I had not heard of them. So here we go. So they claim that they are an organization with, just a moment. Well, I don't have the number in front of me, but I think, oh, here we go. Founded in 1950, RIMS supports more than 200,000 risk practitioners and business leaders from over 70.
I actually know RIMS. I've dealt with them. That's hilarious.
All right, so there we go.
There you go. I know them. Okay, go on. What have the august sages at RIMS had to say? So
they asked for a survey, and 80% of the respondents support a federal cyber insurance program. With a
of course they do.
And 11% were not sure, and 10% opposed. Now, of course, you might think at this point that everyone who belongs to RIMS is a graduate of the Michigan Philosophy or Sociology Department, and they are esteemed leftists. But hold that thought.
I'm not making any judgment about their political persuasions. Just the bipartisan sport of sucking at the government tit never ends. So, but go on.
So in round numbers, 78% employ of the members, they work for someone who employs 1,000 or more people. 40% of them, their employer employs more than 10,000 people. So this is a cross section of larger aspect of American business.
Sure.
And what they were complaining about is that they were not able to procure coverage in limits that they sought, so that their carrier, of course, was seeking to limit its losses.
Sure.
And they didn't provide these esteemed organizations the opportunity to purchase the levels that they thought was appropriate. So they like to see this federal backstop. Now, here's where it gets really, really interesting, because assuming that this is representative of other people who have commented to GAO on this, and the comment period expired November 14. I consider doing exhaustive research to give you all sorts of data on that, but that's a lacuna. We'll just have to deal with that bit of sorrow.
Or perhaps a penumbra, if you will.
Or perhaps a penumbra. So here's where it gets interesting. Let's think about a federal backstop insurance. There's so many different places to start. We'll start here. Right now, and I think this is constitutionally sound, states have the right to regulate insurance carriers.
Yep.
If there's federal backstop insurance, it is, let's say, clumsy, with the idea that there could be many different standards or approaches across the country, depending on the state, all of which have relative rights to draw on these federal funds. It might, a sardonic observer, a cynical observer might think that that would motivate a state to pull back a bit on regulating insurance carriers to dump the load upstairs to the federal people.
No way. Budgetary games and fiscal chicanery between the states? Get out.
Right.
Didn't so we one solve that in 1865?
I don't think so. Based on our conversation, that turmoil is
still debatable. The bills are good for me. Well, as long as they were signed by Abraham, the treasurer, go ahead.
So you might say, oh, here's a solution. Let's just pass a federal statute that mandates nationalized, standardized insurance across all 50 states.
Oh,
now,
you think insurance sucks now? Why don't we make it federal? That's a great idea.
Oh, but we'll get there because you see, there's something called separation of powers, and so you need to get through the corral of whether this is constitutional or whether that deprives the states of their respective rights if you have standardized insurance regulations throughout the country. And I do not stand in the path of trying to predict where that one will be resolved. Again, 1865 may not have resolved anything, so I don't know, a couple of lawsuits presided over by liberal arts majors with a law degree and wearing a robe, you understand, who will determine the future of it.
There's nothing worse than enumerate clowns telling us what to do. Let me back up for a second because I think this is important, which means there's nothing worse than our government. So at least they're not, nasty old men like killing girls for uncovering their hair. So on a relative basis, we're still winning. When it comes to losses, I think this is fairly important, right? Because what is the if you know, great. Otherwise, we'll reserve it for a research project for a later episode. What is the breakdown of what count for losses in a cyber event? Is it physical damage, like someone like we damage the centrifuges in a nuclear plant in Iran and it blows up? That's physical capital damage. Or is it more nebulous, like lost hours of work? The power went out, the HVAC system doesn't work, and my 9,000 bureaucrats got a 3-day weekend instead of a 2-day weekend, and I add up their hours, and that's my loss, right? What is the usual loss attribution in these events, or is there such a thing?
Well, I'm glad you asked that because it makes it more fun. It's the latter, because of course it's going to include my favorite, the loss of reputation.
So I'm Apple, and my reputation is still awesome, even though I have child labor sweatshops in China without air conditioning, waking kids up at 4 a.m. to do a rush hour of screens I need so that my leftist adherents in America can type outrage at Elon Musk allowing First Amendment back into Twitter. Right, exactly. So I get it. So that's fine. That's all good. That's all right. But when the obnoxious twit with the $4 coffee and the $9 boba tea and the $9,000 phone that the kid got paid 4 cents to make, when he gets interrupted from bitching about Elon Musk on Twitter, that is counted as a loss. Do I have that right?
Well, I would pull back a little bit. I want to pick on my favorite subject, the law firm of Smith, Jones, and Barney.
Right.
They are handling rather intricate investment affairs for the Messina Family Trust, which is a far-reaching octopus with countless tentacles.
But aside from
that, so the law firm Smith and Jones calls you one day, the managing partner, and you exchange pleasantries, and he says, "Oh, much like Peter Sellers at the end of Dr. Strangelove. Oh, well, Chris, you're good and I'm good. So everyone's good.
Everyone's good."
Oh, by the way, we've talked about cyber losses, and well, we had a little problem, Chris, and your dad has been compromised. Now, is that
my dad has been compromised means that Putin has my passwords and all my information sitting on his desk. Is what my dad, and he's busy talking to Comrade G about, God, I didn't know he owned so much.
Well, and maybe he's even changing your investment structure. Now, I ask you, would that maybe impact the reputation of Smith Jones Law Firm in your eyes? It might, right?
It might. It absolutely might. I would think the damage to his knees from the guys I'm sending him to see him right now is a lot worse than his reputational damage. But let's assume he's hiding in a bunker and they can't find him. Moose and Rocco have been unable to help the judge find his checkbook. Fair enough.
Yes.
So the losses to his insurance carrier, who says it's an act of war. Messina's involved in supporting Ukraine. The Russians attacked his law firm. We lost $80 million in reputation. I want a payout. Do I have this chain of events right? And now the 80% of RIMS members, which is the Risk Management Association, they want the taxpayer to write Smith & Wesson, my law firm, a check for those damages before I find them.
Yes, but I think that maybe the feds only have in mind the top tier, and they're still going to make the carrier pay a certain amount of the loss. So understand this tempers your
Nice. So
sense
you're
of
going to contribute to pay off the contract they entered into willingly. That's really great. It's wonderful.
Yes.
What fine corporate citizens.
And what I particularly like about this circle is that a big part of the driver here is the insurance carriers drawing upon a definition of war or nation state, where the fulcrum of the advantage to them is how the federal government characterizes the event. It's very poetically closed circle.
And this characterization, no doubt, is done by a committee of senators, of 9 or 10 senators, all of whom received maximum donations from every executive of the insurance industry in the last election cycle. Am I getting this right?
Perhaps over lunch.
Perhaps over lunch. And they got $38 billion from Sam Bankman-Fried, which he took from the American taxpayer by laundering it through Ukraine back through his Ponzi scheme in the Bahamas with his polyamorous amphetamine-free girlfriend. Am I getting it all right now? Am I going to painting the picture for my listeners that how this works so well on their behalf?
Yes, right. So we need to talk further. So I took some points because there's so much to talk about. So we need to have more fun here. So let's just accept that this is now
fun being different ways the U.S. taxpayer is being violated constitutionally and having the value of their dollar destroyed. Go on, let's have some more fun.
So CISA, you understand, unlike containing the flu, CISA says this is only getting worse, not better.
Right, because we can't lock down the internet, try as we might. Right.
Yeah, so it's only getting worse. And here's what I like. So let's pretend that you are a financial investment firm, and you know that one of your competitors is not implementing proper cyber controls.
Okay. And I know this because my hackers are better, and we have all their passwords. Right.
Why wouldn't you hack them? Because you want to maintain a competitive edge. Well, are you going to call a government office and say, oh, by the way, there may be a question about whether my competitor should be eligible for this federal backstop insurance because I know he is not implementing proper cyber hygiene. Is there a whistleblower statute in the offing? Do you get a percentage of your competitor's profits because you called them out on their bad service?
Good question.
Good question.
So many incentives that cross purposes, none of which yet have a single thing to do with quality of service to insurance policyholders or taxpayers.
Well, and also, a fundamental premise here is that American business in the large has cybersecurity controls in place if they have cyber insurance coverage. In other words, the cyber insurance companies won't give them coverage unless the cyber insurance companies have concluded that this potential customer, potential insured, has proper cyber controls in place. That's fine for that photograph in time.
Right.
But what about the remaining 11 months before the next policy renewal occurs? How does the carrier monitor the customer? Or do we have surprise audits? And what's the privacy level of those audits? And here's what I like, is that some large commercial enterprises are now directing their vendors and sub-vendors to verify their cyber protocol, which is a good precaution.
Sure.
But once again, does the large commercial enterprise obtain the right by contract to conduct audits and really dive into the business of the vendors and sub-vendors? And if they do so, if they have that right, and they obtain information which suggests that maybe there's been a transition for the negative on the part of the vendor for the cyber protocol it represented was in place, does the large commercial enterprise have the option or the obligation as a staunch American citizen to notify the feds that there's been a deterioration by this particular commercial enterprise, domestic commercial enterprise? Maybe that should impact their eligibility for the federal backstop insurance. You see, this could become a very animated landscape.
It's animated instantly. This is the major problem is what are the worst words in the English language? Hi, I'm from the government. I'm here to help you. Yeah, there's, in case anyone's missing the point, I think a federal backstop to private activity is the stupidest thing in the universe. All it ever does is lead to laziness and lead to, clever people gaming a system and privatizing the benefits. And then when there's a blow up, whoop, just hand it off to Uncle Sam and he'll pay for it. Especially given, and we touched on this previously, that not facetiously, there's a continuum between I can make anything secure, right? I can make anything secure. It's going to be really hard to access it, right? But the continuum of really, really open is I can make it really easy to access, put all the data up on the internet, point everyone to it, and don't even put a password in front of it. Well, that's easy to use, but kind of really sucks for you if that's how your broker decides to use your information. Or I can put it all on individually encrypted flash drives that are locked down and put in a vault in Fort Knox and guarded by Cerberus and 40 really nasty guys with machine guns. Again, secure, hard to get to. So the balance is, and as we practice, is air gapping sensitive information, encrypting data that matters, and separating fields from data that really, really, really matters, right? So it's a pain in the ass, but part of the reason it's important to raise is you can secure your data in this world. Most people don't, and don't do it effectively because it's irritating. It's hard to deal with. It's hard to call up data for reports. It's hard for a range of reasons. But that doesn't mean it can't be done. It just means people don't like to do it. So the idea that the federal government is going to further backstop bad cyber hygiene by saying, oh, even if you get attacked and the feds tell you it was Russia, don't worry, you're still going to get paid. I mean, just the terrible effects up and down the chain of this are a misery. You've been looking into it. Is there an indication? Please give me an answer. I know I'm not going to get that the feds are resistant to this idea of providing a blank check backstop for this stuff, or is that still to be determined?
I'm glad you raised that because connected to the report I referenced where the insurance and CISA asked for the comments, they attached some comments from other federal agencies, and those agencies, hold on to your chair, all favored the federal backstop insurance.
No way. The administrative state bureaucrats are in favor of putting the taxpayer on the hook for more shit? No.
I know this is catching you off guard.
It is. I'm glad I'm sitting down because I would be reeling in astonishment.
Now, I can't resist going off on one small tangent here. So I think we talked about this before, that the Department of Treasury, yes, we did. The Department of Treasury issued the edict to say that if you pay ransom to a party on the list, right?
Yes, love that. Love that. So if you can unlock your systems by giving some klutz 3 Bitcoin and moving on with your life to free up the systems for 800 employees, you are now liable to prosecution under a federal felony.
Yes, and
these are the same clowns that want you to report this event happened to you.
Exactly right. And just to enrich this point, because you'll remember this, that you can, of course, stay out of harm's way by not paying the bad guy, because you can go to the list. And when we spoke before, that list was 1,934 pages long. But as I told you, it's searchable.
It's searchable. It's searchable. So if I pay a ransom to someone not on the list, am I good?
Well, you see, that's the rub, Chris, because when they were on the list, they called themselves Messina 56 Petya Champs. But now they call themselves Chris's Rodeo. And who knew? It's
who
the
knew?
same.
Different name.
Different name, and Chris's Rodeo just hasn't quite
and
made.
As the Swan of Avon admonished us oh so many years ago, what's in a name?
What's in a name?
Apparently felony charges.
But you can, of course, stay in out of harm's way, according to the rules, by reporting timely and cooperating with the Department of Treasury. But if you do so, is that data going to be transmitted to the folks who administer the federal backstop insurance and perhaps used against you if they decide that you fell short of the proper standards for cyber hygiene. So
which
there
means
you go.
100% of the time, because it's up to them to decide whether you fell short.
So the rules are very clear. Just make a responsible decision.
Yeah, and just, and if you really care about comfort and you find that prison wear is scratchy, get your own orange suit made beforehand. And ask the judge if you can wear it at least like your first night, because when the fellow prisoners find out it's made of cashmere wool blend, they're going to beat you and take it from you anyway. So it's a tough one.
It's a tough one.
So what do you suggest? Let's now that we've pointed out, and I always find it valuable on the show to say kind of what's our point. We've pointed out to at least the American taxpayer yet another multi-billion, if not trillion-dollar hole that will be dug for them because everyone gets hacked. So whether or not corporate officers go to jail under the Treasury rules, while the Treasury is backstopping the same losses they're imprisoning you for, is there anything, no matter if it's a mosquito fart into a hurricane, is it even worth it for someone to put this on a note to the congressperson and say, I don't think this should happen? Or is that just going to give you a brief charge of civic zeal and nothing's going to come out of it?
I think the answer to your question is that the responsible American commercial enterprise says this is not a good idea. It is, you're waiting for this word, messy. And it
very messy. Very messy. One of the messiest we've heard, actually.
and I urge you to continue to provide incentives through the insurance carriers, collaborate with the insurance carriers to provide incentives for American commercial enterprise to up their game on cybersecurity, pursue best practices, and that's much simpler, much better cost effective, and more consistent with our system, which is where we have a modified free market enterprise where people are responsible for their own actions. And I cannot let me go without remembering at all times we need to recall, in the immortal words of our friend Carl Schmitt, sovereign is he who determines the exception.
Exactly right. That is absolutely perfect. Well, Bruce, always a joy. One more example of Leviathan doing its best to curl its smothering tentacles around American free enterprise and the rights of taxpayers. We're going to know this show is a glaring success when I suddenly disappear down a memory hole and I'm in Leavenworth knocking rocks together saying, I'm done making my pushing and gravel today, sir. Maybe you'll be there with me. So who knows? But thank you for the time. Is there, that is a good admonishment from Carl Schmitt. Is there's, I've asked, there's something actionable. There isn't. I can't even tell people to vote accordingly. This is one of those things that the administrative state just grinds forward on. And it's very hard to change.
It could be a good idea to write a letter to your congressional representative.
Do that. You'll feel great. And then you can join us in the sense of delightful civic impotence that comes whenever you find something blazingly stupid the feds have done, that when you find it out and they finally hold committee hearings, they then double the budget for the same stupidity the next year. So thank you very much, Bruce. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Always a joy. And to all my listeners, I hope by now you understand that I don't even have to say it. You should turn off the mainstream media who are lying to you in chorus, no less, and tune into Messy Times.
I do think that your listeners deserve to know that when I actually referenced you in my LinkedIn, you will recall that I seemingly was put in purgatory for a period of time.
I not only am getting myself banned, but anyone associated with me is getting banned. I must be having an impact.
I took it as a point of pride. I just wanted
a point of pride. Everyone listening to this should feel free to post it in their LinkedIn account, see what happens to them. Eventually, if everyone posts my material, the LinkedIn has to relent. Maybe not. Who knows? Maybe not. Excellent. Until next time, enjoy the coming December, and I'll talk to you soon.
Good. All right.
Learn what Bitcoin is, how it works, and why it matters. Bitcoin 101, your ultimate guide to the fundamentals of blockchain.